The Galactic Council chamber buzzed with nervous energy as representatives from 47 different species gathered for the most important diplomatic session in centuries. Earth had finally been granted full membership status, and their ambassador was arriving today. The massive crystalline dome stretched high above the assembled delegates, its translucent walls offering a breathtaking view of the triple moons hanging in the purple-tinged sky of Nexus Prime. Ambassador Marcus Kane stepped through the atmospheric barrier separating the human transport shuttle from the station's main corridor. He moved with a quiet confidence that seemed almost casual, his weathered face showing the kind of calm that came from years of experience. The man appeared to be in his 50s, with graying hair neatly combed and wearing the simple black diplomatic uniform of Earth's Terran Federation. Nothing about him screamed dangerous. Nothing suggested he was anything more than a career diplomat. The Zephyrian delegation whispered among themselves as Kane passed. Their insectoid features twitched with curiosity as they observed the human. To them, all humans looked deceptively fragile with their soft skin and lack of natural armor. The Korath warriors, standing nearly 8 feet tall with their rock-like exoskeletons, barely glanced at the human ambassador. In their minds, humans were just another weak species that had somehow managed to develop space travel. Kane nodded politely to each delegation as he made his way to the human section. His movements were measured, precise, but not in a way that drew attention. Years of training had taught him how to blend in, how to appear harmless while remaining constantly aware of every exit, every potential weapon, every possible threat in the room. What none of the alien delegates knew was that Marcus Kane had not always been a diplomat. 20 years ago, he had been something else entirely, something that had earned him a reputation so fearsome that even mentioning his operational code name could make hardened criminals surrender without a fight. The underworld had called him Baba Yaga, the mythical witch from ancient human folklore, because, like the legend, he was something you sent to kill the things that went bump in the night. The High Chancellor, a tall and elegant member of the ancient ethereal race, called the session to order. Her voice carried across the chamber without technological amplification, a gift of her species' natural telepathic abilities. Honored delegates, we gather today to formally welcome our newest member, the Terran Federation of Earth, and to address several pressing matters of galactic security. Kane took his designated seat in the circular arrangement, noting the subtle but deliberate placement that put him in clear view of every other delegation. It was both an honor and a potential vulnerability. His trained eye automatically cataloged the security measures in place, the positions of the guards, the structural weak points of the chamber. Old habits died hard, even after 2 decades in diplomatic service. The session proceeded with the typical formalities. Various species offered their welcomes to humanity, though Kane could sense the underlying tension in many of their words. Earth's rapid technological advancement and military capabilities had made many of the established powers nervous. Humans had gone from discovering faster-than-light travel to building a respectable space fleet in less than 50 years, a pace that most species found both impressive and concerning. During a recess, Kane found himself approached by several delegates eager to learn more about human culture and capabilities. The conversation was polite but probing, each species trying to gauge whether humanity would be an ally or a threat. Kane handled their questions with the practiced ease of a seasoned diplomat, sharing just enough information to satisfy curiosity while revealing nothing of strategic value. As the day wore on, Kane noticed something that made his old instincts stir. Several members of the Korath delegation were paying unusual attention to his movements, their massive heads turning to follow him whenever he moved. The Korath were known for their warrior culture and their direct approach to problem-solving. If they saw humans as a threat, they might decide to take action. The formal dinner that evening was held in the station's grand ballroom. a massive space with transparent walls offering a panoramic view of the star field beyond. Kane moved through the crowd, engaging in small talk with various delegates, but part of his mind remained focused on the subtle signs of tension he was picking up. The way certain conversations stopped when he approached, the meaningful glances exchanged between members of different delegations. The security personnel who seemed just a little too alert. As he stood near one of the great windows, looking out at the stars that held humanity's future, Kane reflected on the irony of his situation. Here he was, representing his species in the highest diplomatic forum in the galaxy, when not too long ago he had been the person governments called when diplomacy failed. He had traded his weapons for words, his safe houses for embassies, his targets for treaties. But as he watched the reflection of the room in the window, noting the positions of everyone behind him, Kane realized that some things never truly changed. The instincts that had kept him alive through countless dangerous missions were still there, still alert, still ready. He had learned to channel that awareness into diplomatic intelligence gathering, but the fundamental skills remained sharp. The Korath war chief, Grimjaw the Breaker, approached with deliberate steps that echoed across the polished floor. His species believed in direct confrontation, and Kane knew this conversation would be different from the polite diplomatic exchanges he had been having all day. "Ambassador Kane," Grimjaw's voice rumbled like distant thunder. "Your species is young but ambitious. The Korath respect strength, but we also know when to recognize a potential threat." Kane turned from the window, meeting the alien's 4 eyes with steady calm. "Chief Grimjaw, I appreciate your directness. Humans value strength as well, but we prefer to use it in service of peace rather than conquest." The massive alien's mandibles clicked in what might have been amusement or derision. "Peace is maintained by strength, human. The question is whether your kind understands this truth." Other delegates began to gather around them, sensing the tension in the air. Kane remained relaxed, his hands clasped behind his back in a posture that appeared non-threatening while keeping his options open. Years of experience had taught him that the most dangerous moments often came disguised as simple conversations. "We understand it very well," Kane replied evenly. "Perhaps better than some might expect." As the evening continued, Kane found himself increasingly certain that something was being planned. The patterns were too familiar, the signs too clear to someone with his background. Multiple species seemed to be coordinating their movements, and several individuals had positions that would make excellent vantage points for an attack. The question wasn't whether something would happen, but when and how. When the dinner finally ended and delegates began retiring to their quarters, Kane made his way back to the human embassy section of the station. His suite was comfortable and well-appointed, but he immediately began checking it with the thoroughness of someone who had survived by being paranoid. Hidden surveillance devices were a given in diplomatic facilities, but he was looking for signs of something more sinister. As he prepared for what might be his last peaceful night for some time, Kane allowed himself a small smile. If certain parties had decided that removing Earth's ambassador would send a message about humanity's place in the galaxy, they were about to learn a very important lesson. They should have done their research more carefully. They should have asked why a species as young as humanity would send someone with Marcus Kane's particular skill set as their first ambassador to the Galactic Council. They should have wondered why his diplomatic credentials were so impressive despite having no apparent prior experience in international relations. Most importantly, they should have asked themselves why the human government would choose someone with the operational history of the man, once known as Baba Yaga, to represent their species in the most important diplomatic venue in the galaxy. Tomorrow, Kane suspected, they would learn the answers to all of those questions. Kane's eyes opened 3 minutes before the first infiltrator made contact with his door's security system. Years of sleeping light had trained his body to wake at the first sign of danger, even when his conscious mind couldn't identify the threat. He lay still for several seconds, listening to the subtle sounds of the space station at night. The gentle hum of life support systems, the distant vibration of rotating sections maintaining artificial gravity, and underneath it all, the barely perceptible sound of movement that didn't belong. Rolling silently from the bed, Kane moved through his quarters with the fluid grace of someone who had navigated hostile territory in complete darkness countless times before. His diplomatic luggage contained more than formal wear and treaty documents. Hidden in specially designed compartments were items that would have surprised anyone who believed Marcus Kane was simply a career diplomat. The first weapon he retrieved was a ceramic knife, invisible to most scanning systems, and sharp enough to cut through the advanced materials used in alien armor. The second was a small device that looked like a standard diplomatic communication tablet, but could be reconfigured into several different tools, including a very effective electromagnetic pulse generator. Kane positioned himself behind the reinforced desk in his study, angled so he could see both the main entrance and the emergency exit. His breathing was controlled, his heartbeat steady. This was familiar territory, even after 20 years. The adrenaline that might have overwhelmed a normal person was channeled into heightened awareness and perfect focus. The door's electronic lock disengaged with a soft click that would have been inaudible to most species, but Kane's enhanced hearing caught it immediately. The first figure through the door moved with the confident stride of a professional, scanning the darkened main room with military precision. The assassin was Korath, as Kane had expected, but smaller than the typical warrior caste. This one was built for stealth rather than direct confrontation. 2 more figures followed, and Kane revised his assessment of the threat level upward. The second infiltrator was clearly from a different species entirely, possibly one of the shadow-dwelling umbrals who specialized in infiltration and assassination. The third figure made Kane's blood run cold with recognition. The movement pattern, the careful attention to sound discipline, the way the figure checked corners and sight lines, this was someone with training that matched his own. They had brought a human. Kane remained perfectly still as the 3 assassins spread out through his quarters, their movements coordinated with the precision of a team that had worked together before. They communicated through hand signals in a modified version of standard galactic military tactical language. Kane recognized the signs. They were looking for confirmation that their target was present before proceeding with elimination protocols. When the Korath assassin moved toward the bedroom, Kane made his decision. Waiting would only give them time to set up their preferred killing ground. Better to take the initiative while he still held the advantage of surprise. The ceramic knife left his hand in a perfect arc, catching the umbral infiltrator in the throat before the alien even realized they had been detected. The creature's natural camouflage flickered as its life signs failed, revealing its position to its partners, just as Kane launched himself over the desk. The human assassin reacted with impressive speed, rolling away from Kane's attack, while bringing up a weapon that looked like a cross between a pistol and a surgical laser. Kane recognized the design. It was one of the new stealth weapons developed by certain off-book human military projects that officially didn't exist. Marcus Kane, the assassin spoke in accented English as they circled each other in the main room. Also known as Baba Yaga. Officially retired from active service. Currently serving as Earth's ambassador to the Galactic Council. Kane didn't respond immediately, using the time to assess his opponent. The assassin was younger, probably in their 30s, with the kind of augmented muscle structure that suggested military enhancement. Their stance and movement indicated training from one of Earth's most elite special operations programs. The Korath offered an impressive contract, the assassin continued. But I have to admit I'm curious about something. Why did Earth send their most legendary killer to play diplomat? The Korath assassin, meanwhile, had recovered from the surprise of his partner's death and was moving to flank Kane from the other side. These weren't random killers. They were professionals who had done their homework and come prepared for exactly who they were facing. Kane's response came in the form of action rather than words. The modified communication device in his left hand activated with a brief electromagnetic pulse that disabled the stealth weapon and most of the electronic systems in the room. Emergency lighting kicked in, bathing everything in a red glow that gave the scene an appropriately hellish atmosphere. The human assassin adapted quickly, dropping the disabled weapon and producing a vibro-blade that hummed with deadly energy. The Korath warrior pulled out what appeared to be a traditional warhammer, but was probably equipped with gravity manipulation technology that would make each blow capable of crushing reinforced bulkheads. Kane smiled for the first time since the infiltrators had entered his quarters. "You want to know why they sent me to be a diplomat?" he asked conversationally, as he dodged a swing from the massive hammer that left a crater in the floor. "Because sometimes the best way to prevent a war is to remind people why they don't want to fight you." The knife fight with the human assassin was a deadly dance of skill and experience. Kane's opponent was good, probably among the best currently active, but they had learned their techniques in training facilities and controlled environments. Kane had learned his in places where making a mistake meant death, not a lower score on an evaluation. The ceramic knife found gaps in the assassin's armor with surgical precision, drawing blood from a dozen small cuts that would slow their opponent without immediately incapacitating them. Kane was fighting to subdue, not kill. He needed at least one of them alive for questioning. The Korath proved more challenging. Their natural armor could deflect the ceramic blade, and the warhammer created an area of denial that forced Kane to stay mobile. But Korath warriors, for all their strength and ferocity, were not trained for close-quarters assassination work. They were used to battlefield combat where their superior size and strength could dominate. Kane used the aliens' expectations against them, feinting toward direct confrontation before sliding under a hammer swing and driving the blade into the joint where the Korath's armor plates connected at the knee. The alien stumbled, and Kane was already moving, using the creature's own momentum to drive them into the reinforced wall with enough force to crack their exoskeleton. The human assassin, bleeding from multiple wounds but still dangerous, made one final desperate attack. Kane caught their wrist, twisted to dislocate the shoulder, and applied pressure to a nerve cluster that dropped his opponent to the floor, conscious but paralyzed. As the emergency klaxons began to sound throughout the station, Kane knelt beside the captured assassin. "Now," he said quietly, "let's talk about who hired you, and why they thought killing Earth's ambassador was a good idea." The interrogation was brief but productive. The Korath High Command had indeed arranged the assassination, but they hadn't acted alone. Several species had contributed to the contract, seeing humanity as a threat that needed to be eliminated before it could establish itself in galactic politics. The plan had been to make Kane's death look like the result of political extremists, giving the conspirators plausible deniability while sending a clear message to Earth. When station security finally breached the sealed quarters, they found Ambassador Marcus Kane sitting calmly at his desk, reviewing diplomatic correspondence on a backup tablet. 3 would-be assassins lay unconscious around the room, subdued but alive. The most experienced investigators on the security team had never seen anything like it. A single individual had defeated multiple trained killers without sustaining a single significant injury. Ambassador, the security chief, a multi-armed Nexari with extensive military experience, approached cautiously. "Are you injured? Do you require medical assistance?" Kane looked up from his tablet with the same calm expression he had worn throughout the diplomatic sessions. "I'm fine, thank you." though I believe we'll need to have a serious discussion with several of the delegations about their understanding of diplomatic immunity. As the bodies were removed and the crime scene was processed, word of the incident began to spread throughout the station. The story changed with each telling, growing in scope and drama, but the basic facts remained consistent. Earth's ambassador had faced multiple assassins and emerged unharmed. By morning, every delegation on the station had heard some version of the story. More importantly, several had received discreet communications from their intelligence services, providing additional context about Ambassador Marcus Kane's background, information that had been carefully classified but was now being shared to prevent further misunderstandings. The man Earth had sent to represent them in galactic politics was not just a diplomat. He was the most feared human operative in recent history, a man whose reputation had been built on successfully completing missions that others considered impossible. The humans hadn't sent a peaceful negotiator to the Galactic Council. They had sent a warning. The emergency session of the Galactic Council convened 12 hours after the assassination attempt, and the atmosphere in the Great Chamber was unlike anything the assembled delegates had experienced before. Gone was the casual confidence that had marked their interactions with the human ambassador the previous day. In its place was a tension so thick it seemed to affect the very air circulation systems of the station. Ambassador Kane entered the chamber wearing the same diplomatic uniform, walking with the same measured pace. But now every alien eye tracked his movement with new understanding. The Korath delegation, notably smaller than before, avoided direct eye contact. Several species that had been dismissive of human capabilities the day before now watched Kane with the wariness typically reserved for apex predators. High Chancellor Serenova called the session to order with visible strain in her typically melodious voice. Honored delegates, we are here to address the unprecedented events of last night and their implications for galactic security and diplomatic relations. The Korath war chief, who had confronted Kane the previous evening, was conspicuously absent. In his place sat a much older member of their species, wearing the ceremonial armor of a clan elder rather than a military commander. When the time came for statements, the elder rose slowly, his massive frame somehow diminished by the weight of what he had to say. The Korath hegemony wishes to formally apologize to Ambassador Kane and the Terran Federation for the unauthorized actions of certain military elements within our command structure. The elder's words carried the grinding sound of stone against stone, reflecting both his species' natural vocal patterns and the difficulty of making such an admission. Those responsible have been removed from their positions and will face traditional Korath justice. Kane listened without visible reaction, though those with diplomatic experience recognized the significance of the moment. The Korath had never formally apologized to another species in recorded galactic history. Their entire culture was built around strength and dominance, yet here they were, acknowledging fault and accepting responsibility. Furthermore, the Korath elder continued, the hegemony wishes to propose a formal alliance with the Terran Federation. We believe our species share certain philosophical similarities regarding the importance of strength in maintaining peace. This statement sent ripples of shock through the assembly. Several delegates began speaking at once, their various forms of communication creating a cacophony that the translation systems struggled to process. The idea of the Korath, one of the most militaristic species in the galaxy, offering an alliance to humanity based on respect rather than conquest, was revolutionary. Kane stood slowly, commanding immediate silence through presence alone. When he spoke, his voice carried the same calm authority he had displayed throughout his diplomatic tenure, but now every word carried additional weight. The Terran Federation appreciates the Korath's acknowledgement of last night's events, Kane began, his gaze sweeping across the assembly. However, I think it's important for all members of this council to understand something fundamental about humanity. He paused. allowing the tension to build as he had learned to do during countless negotiations, both diplomatic and otherwise. Earth sent me here not despite my background, but because of it. Every species in this galaxy has had to learn how to balance diplomacy and force. The difference is that most of you learned this balance over thousands of years of gradual evolution. Humanity learned it in less than a century of total warfare that nearly destroyed our world twice. The silence that followed this statement was absolute. Kane continued, his voice never rising but somehow filling the vast chamber. We prefer peace. We genuinely want to work with all of you to build a better galaxy. But we want you to understand that this preference comes from strength, not weakness. The same qualities that made us effective at warfare make us valuable as allies and dangerous as enemies. An elderly member of the ethereal delegation, one of the most ancient and supposedly wise species in the galaxy, raised a delicate hand for permission to speak. Ambassador Kane, your point is well taken, but surely you understand our concern about a species that has produced individuals of your particular capabilities. Kane nodded thoughtfully. I understand your concern, but let me share something that might provide perspective. In the databases of human military history, there are records of thousands of individuals who possessed skills similar to mine. We called them by different names at different times: special forces, black operations specialists, strategic assets. What matters is not that we produced such individuals, but what we chose to do with them. He gestured to himself with a slight smile that somehow managed to be both reassuring and unsettling. I'm here, in a diplomatic role, because my government decided that the skills I had developed could be better used in service of peace than war. This is not unique to me. Thousands of similar individuals have been transitioned into civilian roles, diplomatic positions, or retirement. We didn't continue breeding soldiers when we no longer needed to fight. The implications of this statement hung in the air like smoke from an extinguished fire. If humanity had thousands of individuals with capabilities similar to Kane's and had chosen to use them for peaceful purposes, what did that say about their true strength? What did it suggest about their restraint? A representative from the Crystalline Confederation, a species known for their logical approach to all problems, spoke up. Ambassador, you speak of balance between diplomacy and force. How can the Council be assured that humanity will maintain this balance as you become more established in galactic politics? Kane's response was immediate and confident. Because we've already proven it. We've been capable of interstellar warfare since we developed faster-than-light travel 50 years ago. In that time, we've fought exactly 0 wars of conquest. We've defended ourselves when attacked, we've assisted allies when requested, but we have never initiated hostilities for territorial or resource acquisition. He moved slightly, and several delegates unconsciously shifted in their seats, a reaction that Kane noted with professional interest. The failed assassination attempt last night wasn't just an attack on me personally, or even on Earth's diplomatic mission. It was a test. Some of you wanted to see how humanity would respond to aggression. You wanted to know if we would escalate to military action, if we would demand territorial concessions, if we would use this incident as justification for aggressive expansion. The chamber remained silent, but Kane could see the recognition in many faces. His assessment had been accurate. Instead, I defended myself with minimal force, preserved the evidence, and allowed your own security systems to document everything that happened. I could have killed all 3 assassins. Instead, 2 are alive to face justice, and 1 is recovering in your medical facility. This is who we are. This is how we handle aggression. High Chancellor Serenova spoke into the contemplative silence. The Council has reviewed the complete records of last night's incident, including security recordings and forensic evidence. The professionalism displayed by Ambassador Kane under extreme circumstances has been noted. The restraint shown, despite having clear justification for lethal force, has also been noted. She paused, her ethereal features showing what might have been approval. Based on these observations, and on the statements made today, the Galactic Council formally recognizes humanity's transition to full membership status with all associated rights and privileges. The vote that followed was unanimous, though Kane suspected some of the support was motivated more by caution than enthusiasm. As the session concluded and delegates began filing out of the chamber, many approached Kane directly, not with the casual curiosity of the previous day, but with the careful respect accorded to a potentially dangerous ally. The Korath elder was among the last to leave, pausing beside Kane's position. "Ambassador, my people have a saying, a warrior who chooses not to fight is more dangerous than one who has no choice. We understand now why your species sent you to represent them." Kane met the alien's multiple eyes with steady calm. "Elder, my people have a saying as well. Walk softly and carry a big stick. Today, everyone in this galaxy learned that humanity prefers to walk softly." As the chamber emptied, Kane remained at his position, looking up through the transparent dome at the star field beyond. Tomorrow, reports of the assassination attempt and its aftermath would reach every major government in the galaxy. Intelligence services would begin reassessing their files on human capabilities. Military planners would revise their strategic calculations. More importantly, the message would go out through official and unofficial channels. Humanity was not just another emerging species seeking its place in galactic civilization. They were a mature, powerful force that had chosen cooperation over conquest, but retained the capability to defend their interests. Kane smiled as he watched a human transport ship pass by the station's observation windows. The vessel was sleek and purposeful, clearly built for speed and efficiency rather than intimidation. But now, everyone who saw it would know that its peaceful appearance was a choice, not a limitation. The galaxy had learned that Earth's ambassador was the legendary Baba Yaga, and in doing so, they had learned something fundamental about humanity itself. They were a species that could produce individuals of terrifying capability, but who chose to use that capability in service of peace. It was, Kane reflected, exactly the reputation humanity needed to succeed in galactic politics. They would be respected for their strength, trusted for their restraint, and feared enough that few would test either quality unnecessarily. The mission, as far as he was concerned, was accomplished.